You are listening to Lone Star Community Radio on 104.5 KCZW LP Conroe and 106.1 KZCCLP Conroe and worldwide on irlonestar.com.
Texas Franchise Radio. You ready? Let's go. Robby and Josh going live, and it's time to hit the road. You were tuned in to Texas Franchise Radio. Oh, you're in the...
That's right. Welcome to Texas Franchise Radio, Episode 1. I'm joined with my co-host, Robby Marlowe. Robby, what's up?
Hey, everybody. I hope y'all enjoyed Josh's rap there before this.
Yeah, get him up off the floor, you know. I mean, that was awesome.
And I've got our good friend, Dan Goodwin of Provident Wealth Financial. Welcome.
Provident Wealth Advisors. Pleased to be with you guys. Couple of Shrimp Tank alumni. Nice to be back in studio with you and your digs now this time.
I know, right? So yeah, we've loved being on the Shrimp Tank. You're well versed in all things radio, so we're glad to have you here to assist and help us through this first episode of Texas Franchise Radio.
Happy to be here.
All right, well, I guess this is the part where we got to talk about stuff.
Yeah, I think so.
Let her rip.
All right, so why the show? Why another show? Why another business show in general? Why Texas Franchise Radio? Robby and I we co-found a franchise model called Does the Life Fitness Franchising. It's a boutique for women to franchise, but through that process, we've learned a lot about just franchising in general, and there's nothing more American than franchising. I mean, people being able to buy into a system and create their own business, and just the growth model, as the intro told us, there's 3 different ways that a company can capture market share, right? You can either go the franchise route, you can do the hybrid, which is franchise and corporate, or you can do corporate growth strategy.
It is the American dream to own a business, is
really
it not?
is. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think franchising don't get the, the notoriety it does in mainstream. You know, right now, popular being an entrepreneur, working for yourself, but franchising gives you the ability to work for yourself, but also the benefit of going into a proven model that's not guaranteed, but has the structure for you to succeed.
It's a heck of a lot easier than starting from scratch.
No,
and,
absolutely.
okay, I got to go make a logo. Okay, I got to get all this paperwork. I mean, you underestimate how much goes into starting your own business. And franchising, as the mantra goes, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself.
No, absolutely. And that's, I think it's a good thing. I think getting notoriety for the model is what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. And there's so many misnomers, though, about franchising. And so why the show? To go back to that, Robby and I got the chance to go to Las Vegas for the International Franchise Association Conference, which is the largest trade show where everybody gets together. People like Robby and I get to continue working on our CFE, Certified Franchise Executive material, and you get to continue learning. And we found out that there is a huge misunderstanding in the American population about what franchising is. With the new administration, with the Trump administration, we have some stats on that, and we have a franchise outlook coming for you. A lot of pro-business regulation that's going to help us to be able to scale and do franchising better. But so many people think that your local franchises, your local McDonald's, is just owned by some big corporation. And so they get excited about wanting to put more tax and increase the minimum wage on these big businesses like McDonald's. But what we don't realize is that big corporate store that you think McDonald's, that could be your neighbor. Franchising is local business owners utilizing a growth strategy that is franchising. And so over 60% of people think that franchising is owned by large corporations and not just your everyday citizens that have invested their own money to create their own business. So that is why the show. We want to correct and educate the market on what franchising actually is and bring some awareness to what a great model it is. Dan, you get...
Well, I was going to say keyword there, educate. And I think if someone is a prospective franchisee, they're looking at different franchises, you probably have the mindset that, you know, everybody's got, you know, a product to sell or a franchise to sell. But if I were looking to go in a franchise, I would be looking for something like your show here where I could get an education about pros and cons. You know, certainly franchising is not for everyone, but I would want to, you know, sort of an unbiased education. And from visiting with you guys, that's my understanding of what you strive to do on this show. And that's one of the reasons I was delighted to come and join you guys today.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. And that's it. We want to educate, advocate, and bring awareness of franchising here in the local Texas market, right here in our backyard. And you bring up a good point. Who's this show for? So this show is for 3 different types of people. It's for business owners looking to scale through franchising. So maybe I own Conroe Coffee here next door, and Conroe Coffee is the next Dunkin' Donuts and we want to franchise it. How do we go about that? So if you already own a business and you potentially want to grow through the franchising model, we want to help educate you on that. The second person is people who are looking to invest in a franchise. So, I've already looked at a few different models. I'm starting to begin the investigation process to see which type of a franchise I would like to invest in, or maybe people who've already invested in a franchise. That would be the third group. So, hey, I already own a McDonald's and I'm feeling these struggles, or I already own your local house cleaning franchise and I feel these struggles. What are the ways, what is this franchising model? And because it is complex, franchising is very complex. It's one of the best business models in the world for growth because the franchisor gets to utilize other people's time, money, their capital, and their people. That's the three biggest things that stop you from being able to scale a business, right? The time that I have to put into opening the new site, the people that I have to get to run the new site, and the capital to open the new site. The problem is, where it becomes the reason it's just, why doesn't everybody franchise then? Why is there still corporate models? Why is there hybrid models? There's a lot that goes into it.
I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So I deal in the investment world, and I'm wondering, are there ever any investors that say, you know what, I like the idea of an owner operator running this business. I mean, that's a guy with skin in the game. Maybe he's left the corporate workforce in some way or another, and maybe he needs some capital even to start his franchise. Do you guys ever see instances where maybe somebody, friends or family, says, hey, I'd like to, have an equity stake in this franchise, and I don't want to be an owner operator. I want to be an investor, so to speak. Does that ever, you see that?
So yeah, and like anything else, it depends, right? That's it. At first glance, that's a scenario for disaster, right? We all know there's no such thing as a true mailbox check where you just walk out, grab your check, and you don't ever have to do anything. So there's a lot of franchise systems who protect against just having investors who don't want to also be operators. Jimmy John's, you mentioned Jimmy John's before the show as being a pretty interesting franchise concept. They're very strict about having the actual person who puts up the money be the one they train and the person in the facility actually carrying it out. So it's tough, but there is ways to make it to where people can invest and get it through. But if that has to happen, you have to, in the franchise disclosure document, you have to state that the person who is going to be operating it has to have at least a minimum number of percentage, so that you don't train just some manager off the street and they walk out the door.
And you want the owner operator to be all the way in, not just an investor himself, and not just a job for him or her.
For most models, especially food, because food is so complex, you have to have that operator has to be in there until they've been running for a long time and they're able to train up that manager to take over. And some of the service-based businesses, you can have some investors come in. We're going to bring some people on the show here in a couple months that they own 3 local franchises here in the area, and they take on an investor every time they go to open a new unit, and that works really well. But they're very clear in the operating agreement about what that investment money gets them and what their obligations are going to be for that investment. So like everything else, if you do it correctly, yes, it can work, but it is very tricky to make that work, and it does put up a lot of red flags.
Mm-hmm.
Good question though.
Yep.
So what is franchising in a nutshell? So if I was going to ask you guys, what do you think of when you first think of franchising? Robby, what do you think of when you think of franchising?
When you say franchise, I just think of the brands that were very popular or that are strong franchises: McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, Burger King, the ones that we seen when we were growing up through the franchise systems. Just if you just tell me franchising. But as being in franchising, I see that operating systems, the way to do business, branding. Franchising has multiple meetings, but I have the opportunity of being on both sides, being a consumer and a designer of my own franchise. So kind of means different things.
I think plug and play. I think that traction, a business that's operational, all of these things. I guess I think about an awareness that half the small businesses fail anyway. And in franchising, you probably know the statistic. I don't, but I think the chance of success is vastly greater in franchising when all of you guys have worked. You have a proven concept, and that's what I think about franchising.
And that's when franchising is done right, yes. And franchising is very dynamic. I mean, there's over 760,000 franchise businesses. That's that's counting every McDonald's that's out there. But so that's a lot. 760,000 franchise businesses in the world today. So it is a lot, and so there's a lot of room for error there. you do have a huge leg up on somebody that's just going to go and start their own business from scratch. And you've at least proven out a pro forma to know that these price points are what you need to hit these numbers to be able to get in the green. And you have that 36-month projection before you even start. Whenever you're starting something from scratch, you don't have that luxury. You're playing the guessing game for the first 2 years, changing the model every couple of seconds. You haven't proven it out. So that is one part that's good feedback. Franchising in a nutshell, just read you the definition real fast. It's an economic business model designed to capture market share through the combined franchisee and franchisor efforts to get and keep customers. So it's a two-way street. It's like a marriage, right? And one of the biggest problems in franchising is when a franchise system, somebody comes in to buy a franchise because they want to own their own business, but they didn't want to take the incredibly scary part of being an entrepreneur. So they buy into a franchise. But then they also don't want to be an employee. And for a franchise system to work, they got to kind of follow the script, right? But a lot of times in franchising where that goes wrong is the franchisee starts to feel like an employee. Why is the franchisor telling me what to do? I bought my own business. And so that ownership mentality, if you take in an ownership mentality when you run a franchise, you start to see the other franchises in your own system as competition. So it creates, it's very complex. It's hard. A good franchisor has to use persuasion to show the franchisee why they need to do certain things. And it needs to be a combined effort between both parties to get and keep customers.
You know, guys, it sounds like if you're considering a franchise, that this is a little bit of a journey into self to understand. Hey, am I the right sort, to be in a franchise model, or am I better being, Rambo on my own? And how does someone kind of know to ask the right questions to make sure that there's an alignment in their activities and what they're pursuing?
That's such a good question. I'm going to bring the exact checklist. There's a new book I just read called Franchise Industry, and it has a checklist for those questions you should ask yourself to see if franchising is right for you. I think Doug Ducey said this best. Me and Robby got to hear Doug Ducey give a speech one time on franchise. Doug Ducey is he was the founder and CEO of Cold Stone Creamery. I know my man would back me up there. Cold Stone Creamery during their largest growth run, incredibly bright guy, and he used to say all the time. So if you have on one side of the spectrum, you have Steve Jobs, and then on the other side of the spectrum, you have like a postal worker, like safest job in the world versus 100% entrepreneur. Who is a good fit in that spectrum for franchising, right? And the answer, Doug Ducey said, is you always want somebody right in the middle, but a little more on the Steve Jobs side, right? So you don't, full 100% entrepreneurs usually do not make good franchisees, especially in a franchise system that's got 100 plus units. Now, if you get into a franchise system that's 10, 15 units, they're still trying to figure some stuff out. So maybe you can impact the brand. And some people like being the pioneer. Some people like going into a young brand, being able to help the brand figure out a couple of last minute pieces and have a permanent impact on something that's going to, win at scale.
Yep. Hey, I think you ought to quote that book again, in case a listener wanted to write that down. It sounded like that was a very important book.
Yeah, let me. I'll pull that up in just a second.
Well, a lot of times when you look into franchise, we're talking about being successful in a franchise system. One of it is actually being a consumer of the product. A lot of the guys I've met at the IFA or through franchising really fall in love with the product that they're going into franchising. So there's already a sense of either nostalgia or respect for the brand when going into franchising. So
yeah, that's a good point. All right, we are getting ready to take a break here in just a second, so we're going to wrap that up. The name of that book was Franchise Business by Audie, and I will add that to the show notes so people can find that book. But we are getting ready to wrap it up for a break here in just a second.
A Lone Star Community Radio is Montgomery County's radio station with talk, music, weather, and traffic for Montgomery County. Have a question or comment about one of our shows? Want to know how to reach a host? Just contact the station at irlonestar.com or call in and leave a message at 936-647-3776. Get involved with your community with Lone Star Community Radio.
Hey guys, this is Connor.
This is Dick.
This is Chris. And we're with the Ticket Stub Podcast every Thursday live at noon on 104.5 and 106.1 FM in the Conroe area. Also, anytime at irlonestar.com. You go to irlonestar.com/TTS You can find all of our social media.
And don't forget, we give away 2 tickets to the Grand Theater on every show.
If you like movies and you like complaining or celebrating anything that has to do with the silver screen, check out the Ticket Stub podcast and join us every Thursday at noon o'clock on Lone Star Community Radio.
All right, welcome back to Texas Franchise Radio. It's me, Robby, and we got our good friend Dan Goodwin here today helping us out from the Shrimp Tank podcast. Guy does a great job over there.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right, so let's dive in real quick. So I know this is episode 1 of Texas Franchise Radio. It's going to be up on the podcast. It's going to be up on our YouTube channel. You can listen live now here in Conroe on 104.5 or 106.1. But since this is episode 1, I just want to talk real quick about, why are we up here talking about franchising? Just a quick intro for me and Robby of why we're in the franchise industry and why we want to educate the market here on Texas Franchise Radio. And then we're going to do some roundtable banter. We're just going to ask some hypotheticals. What are some fun franchise models that we know of, maybe when we were a kid or now, and have some fun there. So my quick story, I was in the Marine Corps for almost 14 years. Really enjoyed that. Went in and enlisted, was a helicopter door gunner, and then became a helicopter pilot. Along the way, me and Robby and the wives, Cassie and Kristen. I guess we should probably give them a little bit of credit.
We got to give them a little bit.
Shout out to the ladies.
We started to build Delta Life Fitness, and Robby and I really are a good group to talk about, especially when we talked about those 3 groups that we can help. People who want to maybe franchise their own business, people who are looking to buy into a franchise, or people who are already in a franchise system. Because Robby and I, we didn't come from a ton of money. We didn't go to start some franchise with a lot of money in the bank. Robby and I literally started from a park and grew with the girls, obviously. Me, Robby, Cassie, and Kristen grew Delta Life from a park, cash flowed it through a corporate growth strategy all the way up to at 1.3 corporate studios. Then we went the licensing route. So we're very familiar with the difference between licensing and franchising, eventually into a full-blown franchise. And now to what is a really cool franchise concept that rivals all the boutique fitness, Cycle Bar, Orange Theory Fitness. Delta Life Fitness is a boutique fitness studio made just for women, 30-minute classes, childcare. And we've really got to see that from those days in the park of starting off with nothing, cash flowing it all the way through, all the steps of working with franchise attorneys, doing our own franchise disclosure document very closely with the attorneys, building an operations manual, all those things you need to create a successful. And we've done a lot of things wrong along the way, bringing on people who, probably weren't a good fit, both at the corporate level, franchisees, licensees, that now we have great relationships with, and we laugh and we talk about all the things we've learned, and a lot of them are still in the system and helping us build it and continue to make it better today. So that's kind of my story. It probably aligns pretty closely with Robby's story. And like I said, just now going from the very first time me and Robby ever went to the IFA, they said, you'll really be a franchise expert, and your franchise will be successful when you learn that if you franchise your business, it is a completely separate business model from whatever business you came into. So the biggest step in my growth was the day I realized I was no longer in the fitness industry. I was in the franchise industry.
Yep.
And so that's what I've been on the path of the last 3 years of just trying to learn everything franchising. Robby, was a pretty similar story, or?
Yeah, native Texan, born and raised here in Beaumont, Texas, right down the road. Dad was oil field guy. He worked in engineering, and then that kind of took that route when I started growing up. And it never was something I was really into. I always wanted something else. I was a dreamer, and somehow me and Josh got together, and I got into fitness. I had my own weight loss story. Josh being in the Marine Corps, I took some advice from him, and I shed about 60 pounds, got myself back in shape, got healthy, had a little girl, so I had to take care of myself. And I found a love for fitness at that point. And I was never really in love with fitness, but I started in the park with, and it's a kind of a joke back and forth, I started in the park with 5 people, had to beg my mom and cousin to show up so I wouldn't be the crazy guy in the park. And a lot of that has to do with Josh helping me out and pushing me to the next level. But once we got up and going and got our 3 units, I think during that process, I think me and you sat on the phone more than actually talked to my wife. Because he was in Florida, I was in Texas, and he was in California. I was in Florida. It was we never worked together at the same office, but we always worked on the same dream. And like Josh said, the biggest thing was realizing we're not in the fitness industry, we're in the franchising industry, and really diving into franchising and what that means, and understanding that we all, at the end of the day, want to help people, no matter what business we're in. Fitness business we're in, providing wealth management, or we're building a franchise and giving somebody a model they can take and go be successful. So understanding what the franchise business was, and then diving into it and really finding out a passion that I can still help and affect families.
You were a little more primed for franchising than I was anyway, just the way your brain worked. I remember we were young men in Southeast Texas. I came home for Christmas one year from the Marine Corps. I hopped in your truck to go ride somewhere. I think we were probably 20 years old. And in the side of your truck, you had a franchise book. You and your dad were studying different franchises to look into.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the beauty we talked about earlier, franchise, it's a proven system. Back then, I didn't know what I wanted to get into, but I wanted to get in something that I knew that was going to be successful. I knew franchising at least gave me a path to get there. So really diving into franchising early on allowed me to fall in love with the model and what franchising is.
Nice.
Can I ask you guys a question about that? So I happen to know you personally. I know you have a really good, strong partnership, and I think that's awesome. But people are leery of partnerships. And what's typical as a franchise owner? I guess sometimes there's a sole operator, or you may have, two people that come in and say, hey, we want to be 50-50 partners in this franchise. What do you think about that? Pros and cons of somebody, considering a partnership within a franchise?
Great question. And Dave Ramsey says all the time, it's funny. He says the only ship that don't float is a partnership.
Yeah. Enough said. I get it.
And then the only thing worse than a partnership is a family partnership. So me, Robby, Cassie, and Kristen, we get that question a lot on every radio show we go on and a lot of interviews, because there's so many ways to mess it up. But so the pros and cons, you're absolutely right. So if you do it right, if you go back to Michael Gerber's E-Myth and the way he talks about, there is no such thing. 50-50 equity partners are great. You can always be 50-50 on how the money is split. You can never be unclear about the roles and responsibilities. Dan, we're a big fan of the EOS system. Gino Wickman's book Traction is an excellent book. They recommended it at the International Franchise Association for all franchisors to follow. If you lay that out, if you build your accountability chart, if you stick to a system and a set of rules, business becomes less of you did something I don't like and I'm frustrated with you, and instead it's a set of rules that we follow and everybody plays by those rules. We're all super passionate about what we're trying to build, so of course every now and then you get disagreements and those sort of things, but as long as you always go back to the set of rules and follow those, partnerships, as long as very well defined and clear, can absolutely work. We're going to bring on people on this show over the next few months that are franchise partners, and we'll ask that same question and we'll see how that dynamic's going between the two of them and what they've done. But I'll tell you, you always hear the bad about partnerships or working with family. What you don't hear is the good. Building a business is incredibly hard.
Oh yeah.
I can't imagine.
You guys, and you have offsetting skills and talents and that you bring, right? Isn't that part of what makes your partnership work?
Absolutely. All four of us have our little niche of what we're really good at, and we stay in those lanes, or we try to.
Yeah.
But whenever it gets really hard, it's nice to have some people in the trenches with you. Can I
ask you something, maybe a little harder question?
Yeah.
So are you guys, or 50-50, what if you had an impasse? Do you recommend that somebody has like a 51-49, so effectively that there's one captain of the ship in the event of a conflict or an impasse?
Yeah, and so you do, and there's ways to set that up, and it doesn't. So the good thing about Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth, is those numbers don't have to be tied to equity. In your operating agreement, you can stipulate that however you want to. Just the way Rob, you can still have an operating agreement that deems the CEO that still gets final decision on day-to-day operations.
And you can still be 50-50 owners.
And you can still be 50-50 equity. And then
Good point.
And then so you have an operating agreement that says CEO is responsible for day-to-day decisions. However, in all these really big cases that could affect the equity owners, it's got to go to a board, and here's how the board has to vote on those things.
Got it.
So as long as you're crystal clear in your operating agreement, it doesn't matter how the equity
that
splits.
solves the problem. It. Good stuff.
And I think a lot of time in partnerships, people get in business, they don't think down the road. They just think, we'll figure it out. And they don't ever have the tough conversations that, we've had. I think one of the biggest things, especially when me and Josh went into business together, is I knew that if something ever happened in this partnership, that it would affect my wife and her family. And that was a big, hey, we've got to figure this. If we're going to do this, we got to figure out the best way to do this so that don't happen. So we've been proactively with our communication and just the way everything's set up is to try to stay in front of whatever disagreement there is and don't make a mountain out of a molehill. Like, hey, you know, yeah, it didn't go my way this time, but it's okay.
But knowing the operating agreement is there, you know, in the background, should this situation escalate. Anyway,
Absolutely.
that's great.
Absolutely.
You were about to ask me something right
Yeah,
before
I
I
was.
kind of fired
So,
that question off at you.
No, good question though. And so you've heard my intro into franchising. You've heard Robby's. Dan, what got you so interested that you wanted to that you recently just asked us about buying a 10-pack of Delta Life Fitness franchises? what?
I tell you what, if I could bring franchising, you know, to my world, I might look at it and consider it. We do comprehensive financial investment and tax planning.
Yeah.
And I have to utilize strategic partners. So I utilize board certified estate planning attorneys, business attorneys, but they have their own practice. I have to utilize CPA sort of firms that have their own practices. I use institutional third-party money management. If I could somehow dream up a concept that was immaculate, I'd bring all of those disciplines really under one roof. We do that in a sort of a way, but it's not really all under one roof. And I think if that were possible in a franchise model, it would be Katie bar the door. It could be wildly successful.
Okay. So I wonder if, you know, because Edward Jones is corporate owned, right? Those are all corporate owned. I know with financial wealth advising and all that, it's highly regulated like anything else. Are you able to franchise that model? Is there regulation that would prevent you from franchising?
Yeah, that's you know, you identified you know, a big firm there. It's got, I don't know, some 7,000 advisors, but there, you know, there's no real franchising to that. It's you know, they bring in, you know, a lot of young kids off of the, you know, fresh out of college, and you know, in that instance, not to take a shot at anybody, but 95% of those kids, you know, don't make it, don't last, don't stay.
Yeah.
And there's this concerted effort to leverage their friends and family and all of that for, you know, sort of broker-dealer product sales. But I'm not aware of a successful franchising concept in our world. You know, I mean, I just don't see it. You see medical people, you see that, you know, that open, you know, dental clinics and things like that. You don't really see franchising as a successful delivery method over in our world.
And I wonder why that is, because we know that the service, for years, food has been the largest sector of franchising, but service is quickly starting to surpass food and franchising. So I wonder why. I did, however, just read that it is a mistake to try. One of the beauties in franchising is that you want to simplify down systems, that it can be done at scale. And anytime you accomplish something at scale, it does have to be simplified down, right? You don't have professional chefs in McDonald's cooking the hamburgers, right? You've simplified it down. So I did just read that it is ill-advised to start a franchise with anything that needs highly technical skills. And they mentioned things like you wouldn't franchise heart surgery, right? Because it's too hard to find heart surgeons.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you were to franchise it, the owner would have to be an operator and meet a certain level of expertise. That's how I would probably look at it. And if I can find that, because if I was, you know, a doctor, chiropractor, and I was going to start my own firm,
still don't want to have to go through the work of starting your own thing.
Do I want to have to go figure everything out, or do I want to find somebody that's already did that part of it?
Yeah.
And then I can start my own firm. So it'd be an interesting.
I wonder why you don't see it more attorney and.
Well, kind of back to that, you know, the statistic that half the small businesses fail. What's the success rate in the aggregate? You know, you have any, you know, idea on numbers on that?
We do. So there's a lot of articles out now that are going against that. Forever, we always heard, like, you know, small business failure is this high percent, and then franchising is only 5% fail. That number's misconstrued. I actually just read a couple days ago that compared 1-to-1, the actual failure rates of franchise business versus non-franchise is the same, all things considered, because there's so many brand new brands that you've never even heard of that you could open a franchise model tomorrow for, no kidding, less than $5,000. That's, you know, so if you're looking at a total investment cost of $100,000 or less for a franchise, and they have less than 10 units, that's going to have a much higher failure rate than if, you know, ones that are a little more figured out and they have a really complete, good franchising document. They've got a complete operations manual. They're, you know, 10 plus stores. A lot of those stores are doing well. You've got a startup cost of $250,000 or higher. Your success rates are going to be a lot higher there. So it really depends.
Let me ask both of you guys a question that, you know, I'm thinking about the listeners here. If let's say I worked in a corporate job for 25 years and I built up some assets, and things happen where my job's eliminated, and I started looking at hey, I'm thinking about doing a franchise. What are some things that me as an individual would want to make note of and steer clear of when I see a franchise firm representing their product or service, however it is, their franchise offering? What are some things that would be a red flag that I would want to stay away from?
So there's a lot, and there's too many to mention right here, but there's a book called Take the Fear Out of Franchising. I'll add that one to the show notes as well. That book, the entire book is written around exactly that statement, Dan. So Take the Fear Out of Franchising is a beautiful book, but it depends, right? Like, are you a super conservative person who wants a low margin return and you want it basically comes down to the initial questionnaire. What are you passionate about? What kind of risk level are you comfortable with? What kind of business do you see yourself, or would you be excited to work in, right? Do you see yourself more as a pioneer who wants to have an impact on an early brand, or do you want to go into the most established brand in the world with a very conservative risk that has a low projection? The best thing to do is you need to answer that questionnaire yourself first.
It's finding the right fit, isn't it?
It really is. It's everything. I mean, no matter what business you go into, no matter what's the financial projections, in every franchise disclosure document, a lot of the more established franchises will have an item 19, which has their financial disclosure document. Everybody tells you not to really go off that. You need to go talk to the other franchisees. So that answers the financial picture. Well, kind of. That answers the financial picture for how that operator can perform there. You are going to do well in whatever you're a good operator at, what you enjoy. So it really comes down to what kind of business are you already naturally suited for.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
That's probably the most important thing to think about. So, Dan, if you were going to buy into a franchise system, what is one that you've thought about? What's a brand that you like?
Well, I'll give a shout out to a friend of mine, a really good friend. Had a career change, and he's onto a franchise thing that I'm really excited for him and with him on his journey. I'm alongside he and his attorney and his accounting team as a consultant for his franchise. And have you ever heard of something called Dogtopia?
Those are really popular right now in the franchise space.
So it's not a dog board, and it's a lot of money to go into one of these franchises. It's not a dog overnight stay thing, but it's you guys have young kids, right? Did you ever have your kids in Gymboree? It's like play day.
Oh yeah.
It's like play day. It's like daycare for dogs. And when he told me that he was reading about it, he said every part of his logic and reasoning said this is just no way this would work. But apparently these demographics, there's a lot of millennials that spend a lot of money on their pets, and they drop off and pick up their kids, kind of pets, kind of like kids, kind of like daycare. And so it's a successful model I think they have like 100 stores around the country doing really well.
The name of it is Dogtopia?
Dogtopia. My friend this week is in Phoenix going through a week-long of franchise training over in Phoenix. And I'm just real excited for him.
Good for him.
Yeah, to take this new, I think he's so well suited. They're just such animal lovers. When we go out of town, we're friends. We've known him from church for a long time, but we drop our dog.
He's local?
Yeah, we drop our dog Cal, our Australian Shepherd off, and they're just like, my dog's like his family all of a sudden like that. So he and his family are incredible animal lovers. Talk about what their people are passionate about. And it just was such the right fit after he probably went through some discovery like you're talking about, and asked some hard questions and had some prayer over it. I mean, their family is going in this as a family endeavor, kind of like your family is. So
nice.
So anyway, I was just excited about that new franchise that I had no awareness of until he came across.
We've heard a lot about it. The pet space is picking up more and more. We're about to run to a break here, but the pet sector in general for franchising is really starting to Barkfest and a couple of others.
It's really blowing up right now.
Yeah,
the natural foods, different things like that for the pets.
Cool. All right, we'll kick it over to a break, and we'll be right back on Texas Franchise Radio.
A Lone Star Community Radio is looking for those who are interested in hosting their own talk show with monthly and weekly slots available on Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1, and on irlonestar.com. Start your own podcast, create your first YouTube channel, and be on TV. Contact Lone Star Community Radio online at irlonestar.com or call the station message line at 936-647-3776 to take your first step into the radio world.
Hispanic Chamber Connections with Dr. Carlos Sanchez, President of the Woodlands Conroe Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, featuring event announcements, member highlights, and more. Tuesdays at 1 p.m., broadcasting from the heart of Conroe, Texas on irlonestar.com and Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1.
Welcome back to Texas Franchise Radio, show number 1. We've already covered why the show, what is franchising. We've had a little roundtable discussions. We're now going to dive into my favorite part of the show. It's franchise statistics and then stump the chump.
Statistics. Okay.
Big Rob versus Dirty Dan.
Uh-oh. Oh, my gosh.
Winner gets all the bragging rights.
All right.
So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Like Facebook bragging rights.
You want to just arm wrestle me now, get this over with, and take me down?
Okay, so if you missed any of the show so far, go back and check it out and learn why we're here, what we're doing, how we're educating the local Texas market, all things franchising. So just a couple of things. Top 100 franchises. Usually they're pretty large brands, and we've got a top 10 list here. I'll just run down those real quick. The top 10 as of 2018 is McDonald's, KFC, Burger King, Pizza Hut, 7-Eleven, Marriott International, Remax made the list. What is the last two? We got Dunkin' Donuts, International Continental Hotel Group, and then Subway. Poor Subway took a hit this past year. Went from number 4 last year to number 10.
I think it's a fallout from, like I said, I won't throw anybody on the bus, but there's no protective area in Subway. So you have Subways right next to Subways, and they're having a tough time.
Rumor is in New Orleans, there's 2 Subways that are literally touching each other. That's one of the
corner.
Most franchise businesses have a protected area, right? Like a 3-mile radius. You can't have another one inside of that. Subway has no protected territory. In the small little town Robby and I grew up in, there's 4 Subways, and there's no way that it can support 4 Subways.
Did you see something in the news recently about 7-Eleven? I think they went into China. You guys seeing these franchise go into international markets?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's actually, they have a whole section on that when we go to the International Franchise Association. Like, they always say the best market, and that's actually a statistic, is the best market is the North America market, and they say dominate that first before you try to go international. But look, Dan already knows some stuff about 7-Eleven, and it's coming up on our Stump the Chump series here in just a second. Robby, you better freshen up.
Yeah, looks like I need to
Stump the Chump.
So real quick with franchising, like I said, just over 760,000 franchise businesses, 3% of the U.S. GDP. That's incredible. At IFA this past year, the franchise industry's largest trade group says Congress and Trump administration's work in removing regulatory barriers and stimulating the economy has really helped encourage the growth. It grew over 6.2% last year, which is one of the biggest jumps it's had in a long time. Okay, are you guys ready for Stump the Chump? So the way it works, rules, I'm going to ask each person.
Yeah, not everybody at once, right?
I'm going to ask Big Rob and Dirty Dan 4 questions apiece. You get 1 point for each correct answer. If you do not answer, the other participant will get a chance to take a shot at it. Person with the most points gets bragging rights, and then we do have a tiebreaker if we need to go to that. All right? Are we ready?
Did you get the answers in advance? I didn't.
No, I didn't either. So
Okay.
this is brand new to me too. Dan.
All right.
I can promise you he did not. I'm hoping he loses.
Let her rip.
I will warn you, though.
Where's
Rob
is there
is-
dunce cap around here? I need to go ahead and put on right now. Look,
All right.
the sound guy's looking for one.
I'm going to warm us up with a couple of softballs. All right. Mr. And this is, some fun facts and then some franchising facts. So we'll see here. Dan, who won the 2017 Major League Baseball championship?
Oh my God. Astros. Yeah. That's a meatball. Yeah.
All right. Dirty Dan on the board with one.
Oh, yeah.
Robby, again, another easy softball here. Where would you go to find the Sea of Tranquility?
The Sea of Tranquility. I have no idea.
Dan, do you know that one?
The Sea of, where would I go?
Where would you have to go to find the Sea of Tranquility?
I would probably head towards the Mediterranean.
So it's actually on the moon. I don't know if it,
Okay.
anybody knew that or not. Just a couple of softballs. I figured those were pretty close to the same caliber question. Okay, so back over to Dan. You talked about 7-Eleven, the 7-Eleven franchise. Every franchise has a high and a low estimated startup cost. What do you think the high-end startup cost of a 7-Eleven would be? The high-end.
$1 million. $1 million.
$1 million? Robbie, what do you think?
1.5.
Oh, man. Robbie got this one from you. It's 1.6.
All right.
So over to, so that's 1
We're in a
point for
dead
Big
heat.
Rob. A good follow-up question to that. Robbie, out of that 1.6 on the high end, how much of that is for the franchise fee for a 7-Eleven? How much of that is for the franchise fee?
75,000.
And Dan?
I would say 150,000.
Dan gets that one, but it is $1 million. It's the franchise fee.
Whoa.
Good
Out
for
of-
7-Eleven.
Yeah, I'm guessing a lot of that you get most of the
It's probably
the entire store.
Well, you
They
get
probably
a year's worth of inventory or something. Hopefully you get something to,
a fully equipped store.
Yeah.
Got to give that point back to Dan though. So
If somebody
Dan,
is a 7-Eleven operator, if you know the answer to that, send it to the show.
Yeah, send it in. You can send it in to TexasFranchiseRadio@gmail.com. If you have any questions, go ahead and send it in. All right. Back to Dan. Where is the 7-Eleven corporate headquarters located?
It is in Frisco, Texas.
Man, did you know that?
No, I didn't. Oh, man.
Am I right?
You are correct. It's right around, yes.
Yeah. A shout out to one of my clients in our wealth management firm that works there. And that's, I was a guess, but at least I know where my one client who works at 7-Eleven, I know where he lives. That was quite the lucky guess. But
Rob, you're behind on the count. 3-1. To my man here. All right. Back over to Rob. So, Rob, Wiener Schnitzel franchise term is how long? And I'm going to give you a multiple choice. The Wiener Schnitzel franchise term. Again, another thing, Dan, on every franchise agreement, you have a term for that franchise before you have to re-up and renegotiate. The Delta Life Fitness franchise term is 10 years. Wiener Schnitzel's franchise term is A, 5 years, B, 10 years, C, 15 years, or D, 20 years.
It's D, 20 years.
My man got it.
he just asked you, how long was your Wiener Schnitzel?
Good job, Rob. Back on the board. 2-3. It's getting close. All right. Dan, I didn't plan this out, but you're back to that. Maybe you got a buddy that works at the Burger King headquarters as well. Where is the Burger King headquarters located? Multiple choice.
It's in Miami.
Jeez, I didn't even need the multiple choice.
I happen to know that because we happen to know who was the CEO of Brenneman, Greg Brenneman, when he left Continental Airlines.
That's right.
He became a CEO. We know their family, and
Okay.
my daughter went to college at Baylor with his daughter, Bethany Brenneman.
No way.
And, yep, we know the Brennemans. And when he took that role, their family moved to Miami.
Next time, Dan, you got to just say, well, I know
This
that
is-
because I know where all of them
This
are.
is one of the perks of being older, guys. It's just like you're not any smarter. You just been around, you collect funny facts.
Rob, I hate to tell you, but he didn't even need the multiple choice on it.
I know.
He just said
I'm thinking he got the answer
Miami.
beforehand.
Still good. We got about 4. Okay. All right. Here we go. Robbie, what is the high-end startup cost of a Burger King? The high-end, so you got on the franchise code you're talking about, you got a low-end, you got a high-end. For a Burger King restaurant, what is the high-end? Closest one wins. Robbie gets the answer first.
I think it's going to be 1.5. That's going to be my go-to number.
2.
Answer is 2.9. Man, Dan walks away with it. Okay, that was it. But the tiebreaker would have been how many Subway restaurants are there open and operating? You guys probably both know that. But as of June 2017, Subway had approximately 45,000 stores located in 112 countries. With the largest being North America. They have 26,400 units here in the United States. And with that, we are getting ready.
Yeah.
Somebody.
We don't have it. It's
Oh,
a fire.
yeah.
We have a plastic fireman cap. That,
I don't even know. Does the winner or loser get that? I'm guessing.
we'll flip a coin for it.
So this week on Stump the Chump, my man Dirty Dan has bested Big Rob. Rob, you're my trivia, my trivia guy, man.
I know. Well, you got to let the co-host, you got to let the guest.
Well, I mean, come on. First question: who won the baseball championship? That was a freebie.
Well, everybody, thank you for joining us on the first episode of Texas Franchise Radio. Dan, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
It was a really fun show. We'll see you back the last Tuesday of next month at 11 a.m. right here on Lone Star Community Radio for Texas Franchise Radio. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you back next time.
Yeah, see you soon.
Thank you for listening to Texas Franchise Radio, where we bring on all the local franchise experts. If you liked the show, please share it with your friends. If you have any questions you'd like answered live on the show, send them to @Texas Franchise Radio on Facebook. Till next time.
Thank you for checking out this production of Lone Star Community Radio. Lone Star Community Radio is Montgomery County's community radio station. Don't forget to check out this show and many others across the Lone Star Community Radio Network, either live on Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1, the Lone Star Internet Radio app, or irlonestar.com's live audio stream, and on replay on podcast, Channel 12's Our City TV in Conroe, or Channel 21 KVQT in Houston, and of course their YouTube channel. This production is copyrighted and all rights are reserved by Lone Star Community Radio. Have a question regarding this program or other Lone Star Community Radio shows? Want to sponsor or start your own show? Call the station message line at 936-647-3776 or email the station at lscrstudios@gmail.com.